And I became very aware that my five senses really did not apply to this place. I say I was seeing these lights and this matrix and web, but I really wasn't seeing it with my eyes. In fact, at some point, the lights were so bright and beautiful that I remember saying to myself, don't look directly at them because they're so bright, they'll hurt your eyes. And when that thought occurred, something pulled me actually to look directly at them, and I did. It's almost like I was able to join with them. It's hard to kind of find the words, but I looked at them and I kind of looked through them, and I got the sense that they were also looking through me into almost the deepest part of me. And I could kind of also see and take in information that was kind of 360 degrees, not in a linear way that we do in the physical world. And I also felt and heard these harmonic vibrations. I would say it was like the most beautiful choir I certainly had ever heard, but not human voices. Just incredibly beautiful harmonic sounds and also dissonant sounds, but somehow they all worked together in an amazing, purposeful and beautiful way. And I just was reveling and soaking in the magnificence of this place and the awareness that I was somehow part of it. And at that moment of surrendering that desire to figure it out and understand it, I started to feel that I was moving at a pretty high rate of speed through this light matrix, and became aware very quickly that these light energies were all souls. Some of them I recognized, some I didn't, but I still felt I knew them. I knew I had been there before, and I knew that every orb of light was unique, but yet there is absolutely no separation. They are connected to each other in a way that is just magnificent, and I'm connected to them.
The next thing I saw was up and to my right, there arose just an amazing, incredibly beautiful, loving ball of brilliant, living light. It seemed to be expanding larger and larger and brighter as I gazed onto it. At no time did this ball of light make me travel towards it. Instead, I just instinctively could not wait to travel towards it just by desiring to do so. The speed of travel was amazing. The closer I came towards it, the purer the love, the stronger my desire to arrive evolved, and the surrounding darkness that I told you about a moment ago was gradually going away. Midway in transit to this amazing ball of living light, my soul, or who I am and always have been, stopped dead in my tracks at the realization of, oh my gosh, I'm dying. Meanwhile, an immense level of comfort and reassurance overwhelmed my realization of my own earthly death, and I simply could not wait or delay my transit towards the amazing place of pure love and peace. So as I felt these feelings by desire, I continued onward towards the living place of light until I arrived all in. Once there, I was greeted by a number of beautiful, incredibly happy, just exuberant, colorful, iridescent souls. We each very much resembled human characteristics, although we weren't exactly alike. At that same time in my life, I had not yet experienced the earthly death of any of my relatives or best friends of any kind. So today, I still couldn't tell you who any of these souls were, but they greeted me heartily as if they'd always known me. Upon arrival to this place, it had an unmistaken familiarity. It was home. In fact, it was all of our homes. In fact, it was the place from where we had all originated. Much like when back here on Earth, you come home from work each night and you cross the threshold of your doorway, you're home. You don't say it aloud, you just know. That's how I felt. I had been to this place before. It was comfortable, it was glorious, and my arrival was like a huge homecoming. Job well done. They were rejoicing with me. I could still see everywhere and anywhere I desired, and I too was every bit as colorful and beautiful and iridescent as each of these glorified souls were. I'm not implying that we all looked alike, because it wasn't the case. The loving, pure light of this place, though, shone through each of us, and God dwelt in and among each of us and in all things in this place. There was complete absence of anything evil or dark or bad. I was able to telepathically communicate with multiple glorified souls all at once throughout my time. Such a girl thing to do, to be able to talk to so many people all at once. The other striking aspect of these glorified souls was that we each had a very heightened degree of wisdom and knowledge. In no way am I suggesting that our knowledge or wisdom was equal to that or greater than that of God himself, because that was never the case. Instead, I'm saying that our wisdom and knowledge far exceeded that of us here in the earthly realm. I greatly enjoyed my various conversations with these glorified souls in this place of pure loving wonder and joy. And meanwhile, just in general terms, I was given to know that I had the option to stay there eternally, or I could return to my earth suit below and complete the gift of life.
So they take me into surgery, and it was during that surgery that I had my second, which was really a near-death experience. It was not an out-of-body experience. I remember sitting on, like, I was, what I would say was I was surrounded again by this beautiful white field. It's just a white field, very bright, but it's not bright like you can't, like your eyes hurt to look at it. It's just light and bright, and I always hear like music. I always hear this music in my head, and I am not a musical person, but I always hear this. I mean, I love music, but I can't play a note of anything. I always hear this music. It's almost like when you hear the voices that they're talking to you, it's almost in this musical tone. It's very hard to explain, but it's, for me, it's not earthly. It's not the same. I guess it's just that very, like a high vibration maybe. So I'm in this big white field of this high vibration, and I'm sitting on something that looks like this. I felt like I was sitting on a ledge, okay? And I'm not alone. I can't tell you how many people I'm with, but it felt crowded, okay? And it felt crowded. And now I think back, and you know, when you're a hospice nurse, I helped a lot of people cross over, probably thousands. And I think a lot of those people were there supporting me. But there were two energies next to me, and they were the ones that were talking to me. And I'm sitting here and I'm feeling wonderful, and I knew the surgery was happening, but I really didn't care about it. You know, I could, you know, in this some distance view here, I knew there was a lot of activity going on, and at one point I even said, wow, what's going on down there? Because it was like furious for several moments. But I'm talking to these people, these beings, and I'm saying, I don't want to go back. And they never judgment, never, you know, they were like, well, they asked me basically why didn't I want to go back, and I was telling my story, why I didn't want to go back. And I said, I can't go back, I don't have enough energy, it's too hard, you know, yada yada, all the human things you say, you know. And I remember just feeling very loved and supported and great compassion. And I can't say that I had a whole life review, but I had some very significant events in my life come before me. My past marriages, some of them were things, well, I would say most of them that they were showing me were things that I had wished I had done differently, you know? At least the first round of viewings I got. And they said to me very clearly that this is your choice, Eileen. It didn't have to be this hard. And I was like, wow, that's just like, because that's how I operated, you know, I was this do it all by myself, and the theme of my conversations with these beings was very much around the fact that it's always about a choice. If it's not working, choose different. You don't ever have to be afraid, and ask for help and support. For me, that was huge because I don't do that well. And they even said, ask us for help and support. You don't even ask us. That's the, and they weren't saying it in a judgmental way, but it was a very loving way about ask for help and support. We're here.
I was instantly transported to another realm. I was suspended within this huge coliseum, and I was actually suspended in the air in between these two massive columns, but the columns went, miles and miles from either side, and the coliseum was behind me. There were stairs, like 1,000 stairs that were coming up to this coliseum. And the coliseum was made of this brilliant light that I would explain. But a most important part of this suspended in the air was I had this incredible presence on my right-hand side. Now, I had no physical form at this time. I can only assume that I was this beam of energy that I felt a part of this greater light. Now, the energy that I had here on my right-hand side was very overpowering, very comforting, and I had no idea what that feel was. If I didn't have 360-degree perception, I would have just assumed that I was against one of these huge columns that I was in between. But there was nothing behind me, so I don't know if it was my higher self, a spirit guide, or part of your soul family. Now, I was greeted by these 4 magnificent beams of energy that were, I'm going to say in front of me, but the perception was all around me. I knew instantly who they were. There was no physical features, but just either from their vibration or just from their frequency, I knew who they were. The first 3 beams were children who died on the ward over those coming weeks. So 2 of them were infants, and 1 was a 3-year-old girl. The communication there was way beyond telepathy. It was just this knowing and understanding everything about them. There was no dialogue at all. I'd love to say that we had this conversation, but it really wasn't about that. It was just about their greater journey. And I had a greater understanding of what their life journey or their soul journey. It was very little reference to their time on earth. And I still believed they were there to let me know that it was okay to let go and that it was okay to move on. That was a message that I did feel was important, because, why would they bother coming to greet me when I had such a small part of my life on the ward? Now, the 4th beam of energy was my best friend who had passed away 6 months before. And the communication with him was slightly different. Again, he was no physical form, but I was able to, I just knew it was him just from whatever the frequency was. Because we did have that connection on Earth, the connection with him was slightly different, and it did feel different. I remember having a specific thought, because he was an atheist, that he was actually hearing this incredible, magnificent beam of energy. Now, beyond these 4 beams of energy that were in front of me, there were still thousands and thousands of these beams of magnificent energies. And it's so difficult to explain because they were huge. If you think about the cedar trees that you have in Yosemite, these massive trees, they were just magnificent and just vibrating in a way that you get this connectedness around them. And it's so real because, like I said, this was 16 years ago. And you will have vivid dreams sometimes, but to remember this in the detail that I had, and the fact that I was obsessed with this place for months afterwards, I just could not get out of my head this incredible realm. But it's not what people say, it's how they make you feel. And that's what I felt up there is what made it so special. Now, behind me as well, there were also these beams within the Colosseum. And again, this is very difficult to explain, but we were all just connected by this. It's like almost like a thread of light or love that everything was connected within this realm. And then my best friend took me back to our last memory together on Earth. And I was very fortunate that I was in the hospital bedroom when he died. And it's an absolute privilege because often it's such an intimate thing that people will die once there's nobody in the room. You could be there for weeks waiting for the person to die. And as soon as you go off to the bathroom or to go and get a cup of tea, the person will die. But he definitely wasn't ready to go. I remember having a conversation with him because we had the 3 weeks leading up to death, and he was trying to get this for his radiotherapy was getting a mask fitted on his brain so they can do the radiotherapy. They didn't even have time to fit that before he died. But he wasn't ready to die at all. He really wanted, he had a fantastic career and he wanted to stay here, which I totally understood. So when I was in that room, I was furious that he died. I was shouting up to the corner of the room saying, please just show me that you're okay. But Brendan had showed me this from his perception. So I was looking down at myself, talking up to the corner of the room saying, please just show me that you're okay. But I could feel all of my emotions at that time, but I could also feel his emotions from his perception. He literally just died, so I had the feelings that he had just left his body and he was at peace instantly and ready to move on at that time. So you hear about these shared death experiences, and I think that's what I had, but it was almost from a retrospective point of view. So it was very extraordinary and confusing, but it was a very vivid memory that I was shown whilst I was up in that realm. And I'm narrating this in a way that it was in a chronological order, but it wasn't. Everything was just in one go, because there's just no time up there. And that's why it's this overload of information that you think must take an eternity for the information that I gained. And it was literally, minutes or seconds that I was potentially there for.
All I could see was light. I didn't see any things, nothing at all. I saw nothing but darkness and a light. Within the light, there was intelligence. And within the intelligence, there were sentient beings within the light. And again, I didn't see anything at all except for the light. The sentient beings I know because they are associated with my studies. I won't give any names or anything like that, but I know. If I was a Christian, I would call the light Jesus. If I was a Buddhist, I would call the light Buddha. If I was a Hindu, it would be Krishna, whatever it was. The light becomes what we believe, what we associate with. And that's immaterial. It doesn't make any difference what we call the light, because it's love. So that, time-wise, if we can count time-wise, that maybe that took place over a period of a few seconds. Then I came back to the body. Then I realized what had happened. And then I said, wow, how can that be, So the vibrations of the body was shaking. The vibrations were very, very, very strong. And as soon as I realized what had happened, I went right back to the light. Boom, came back. Back and forth, back and forth. Light, back and forth. So after so many times of doing this, I realized every time I was going into the light, I was not alone. And within the light, there was a very, very sacred, very extremely loving feminine being within this light. And she talked to me. Again, I had no body. I was only communicating with the light. And the light was able to inform me that basically it was not my time to go. And that I had to return. And the light was home. It was as if we had not been home for millions and millions of years. The longer I stayed in the light, she would come to me. She would show me the wife and the kids and at various stages of their life, a new house, a new car, a boat, everything all the books I love, anything and everything she was trying to show me to keep me, to bring me back and tie me back into the body again. But I did not want to come back at all. After so many times of going back and forth to the heavenly plane, it got to a point where she said, well, if you want to stay, I would like you to meet someone. And I said, well, okay, no problem. I'm here to stay. And what I visualized was as if I was walking down a hall, a long, 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 long hall. And at the end of the hall was a masculine entity, very, very spiritual, very. But again, I cannot see. Everything's black, everything's dark, except for the light. But the light that she introduced me to was a larger light than she was. And this light resonated and it vibrated and it was like a strobe. And it communicated. And I knew who it was in my system, without a doubt. In the system, this entity is like a judge. And it's not an external judgment, it's an internal thing because we judge ourselves. So it's in essence, the essence was a part of me. And in retrospect, at that time I didn't know that. Okay. So he said, well, do you want to stay? I said, yes, of course. You know, I want to stay, of course. And he said, well, let me show you something. And I perceived another entity, another angel, if you can call it. And this particular entity, angel, is a scribe. And is as if there's an essence, a spiritual essence about us that records everything we do. As if this being has a camera, has a microphone, and is connected to all of our senses, all 5 senses and beyond. Our brains, our central nervous system, everything. This entity knew everything about me from the time I was born until the time I was, my present age at the time I was 33. He knew everything, all the good, all the bad. I could not hide. He cannot lie. He cannot do anything. This entity lives, I know, in the heart. It's an incorruptible entity. And he was assisting the light. And he said, are you sure you want to stay? I said, yes. So I saw myself at 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And I was in the neighborhood. I grew up in Washington, D.C. And you know how the little neighborhood kids are. You know, we go around the neighborhood, we do this, we do that. So it was my brothers and sisters and my neighborhood friend, his name was Heidi. His name was Heidi. And Heidi was maybe about a year younger than us. And there was a beehive in the corner. We lived in apartment buildings at the time. And there was, on the bottom floor of the apartment building, there was a windowsill and there was a beehive. And I said, hey, Heidi, pick up that stick and whack that beehive. And we're going to run. All of us, we're going to run and see if we can beat the bees, right? So Heidi, you know, listening to me, I don't know why, he picked up the stick and whacked the beehive, and we all took off and ran. In the apartment buildings, we had a real dark green door. And everyone got into the apartment buildings, and the last one to get in, to approach the door was Heidi. And I had a devious thought in my mind. I said, I'm going to hold the door and not let Heidi in to see what happens to Heidi. And all those bees from that beehive, they stung the daylights out of Heidi. And every single bee sting I felt every sting, the burning sensations, the swelling. His mother came out the apartment building, scared, frightened. I felt all of her fear, all of her fright, all of her rage. His father came out there trying to figure out what, I felt it all. It rippled. I felt every single thing, all the beehives, all the bees, how angry they were for being stung. I felt it all, every aspect, everything I felt. And I knew that I had done something wrong. And then he said, well, you know, in heaven, you know, in this place that we call heaven, we have to be perfect. Are you sure you want to stay? And I felt the energy of the rage and the stings and the sins that I'd done against Heidi. And I said, I'm so sorry. And my heart just opened up and I felt it all. His mother, I asked her forgiveness. The father, I asked, of course, Heidi and the bee stings. And then I turned to the light and I said, well, I have not done anything really, really bad, you know, in this life. I haven't killed anyone. I haven't raped anyone. I haven't stolen. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. I went, you know, the litany of things. I haven't done anything really, really bad, not to stay, you know. And the light, you know, when it talked, it would vibrate, and the strobe would go in and out. And you know, at that time, you know, I knew for a fact because I'd asked on the way, I'm digressing, on the way up, on one of the trips, I wanted to know what I was, you know, what I looked like. And I looked down at myself from, I don't know how, and I realized that what I was a ball of light. That's all I was, just a ball of light that kind of waved and waved. And as the larger light, as he talked to me, he would strobe, and I would in resonant. So it was a light it was like a symphony. You know, it's very much in sync.
Feeling like I was ascending, and I was like in this funnel and going through layers of I don't want to say rainbow of colors. It was more like an aurora borealis where the lights went up and down and up and down. Beautiful, magnificent lights, and they had little sparkles in them. And as I rose through the aurora borealis light effect, all of a sudden I saw my dog that I had as a childhood. I saw Rusty. He was an Irish setter, and he was young and beautiful, and his fur shone. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Our souls of our pets are here. And then I started ascending again through layers of white light, very softly curved. And one layer right after another, and they started in a particular white light, and each layer was a different intensity of white. It wasn't bright, it was soft and mellow, but almost like it was mixed with blues and just different intensities of white light. And there were beings there, just like me, and I'm thinking, whoa, what's going on here? And so I tried to pinch myself, and when I looked down at my body, I didn't have a body. It was only light. It was a light, and the beings that were in these layers of white light were the same, and it was like I had ears, and like I had a head, like I had eyes, and my head was there, just my body was gone. They were the same. It was like we were talking to each other telepathically. We were talking with our minds. And as I passed through and continued ascending, I saw way at the top of this little funnel this beautiful, magnificent ball of light. And it was like when in the past, in the old days, when the television program went out at midnight, there was all of this crackly energy, only this was a ball of light and energy field that was like diamonds and jewels, and it pulsated, it swirled, it pulsated, and it went from all the beautiful hues and colors that exist, almost colors that even don't exist in our earthly world. It was so bright and brilliant, and yet I could look right straight into this light. And as I ascended continuously, I felt buoyant and really quite relaxed. Finally, the stresses were totally gone that we normally have. And in the last layer, it was like the last layer cradled this beautiful ball of light. And there were beings there that said, "We know that you know where you're going." And I said, "I know where I'm going. I'm not even sure what's happening here." And with that, I shot right to the center of this magnificent ball of light above me, just like a catapult. And there I was in the center of this beautiful, beautiful, magnificent light.
Just like floating down, just calmly going towards this white light. The only strange thing of it, I remember these thorn bushes as I was getting there, and I thought, this is going to hurt. But I went right through them, and sitting on this wall was a personage. Long white hair, long white beard, dressed all in white, and a white glow all around him. And he called me by full name. He said, "James Lee Owen Jr., come sit on this wall, let's talk." So I sat down. For some reason I knew it was not God, but I knew it was a very godly person. So I sat, and the first thing we did was go through a life review. He was very stern, but loving. And he pointed out things that I had done that had been disappointments to others and disappointments to God. He then gave me a complete description of what life was going to be back. I wasn't given a choice, do you want to go back or stay? I was told I was coming back because I had work to do. So instruction was given on what work was to be done. It was very thorough, it was very serious, and when it was over, I was suddenly back in my body.
And I was out before I hit the floor, and suddenly transformed onto a dimension of reality in which I experienced myself as a fully integrated person. It was a grassy hill. There was a tree at the top of the hill. I wanted, with every fiber of my being, such as I had fibers in my being, I wanted to run to the top of that hill and get to that tree. I knew that if I did that, I'd never come back here. I was one with every blade of grass as it moved, one with the tree and the light that it was drinking in through its branches, and that light was love itself. Because of that, my new creed is that God is love, right? Those are synonyms. So our task is to become it and to realize we are it. Your spirituality is not determined so much by what you believe as it is by how you love. Breaks down all the walls, doesn't it? So I wanted to run to the tree. I couldn't. There was an entity there, a masculine being. He felt like my best friend, and infinitely powerful and graceful and kind and compassionate. And we walked and talked about my life. And he basically said, David, it's great to see you. Things are going well. You can't stay. You have to go back. You have more work to do. I didn't care about that. I wanted to stay, so I just kept saying, let's run to the tree.
And I remember thinking, I'm just waiting for it to end. And it didn't take but a moment. And all of a sudden, I was somewhere else. And the violence was gone. The cold water was gone. The pain was gone. I was just in this sort of amorphous, sort of light grayish place. And I said to myself, what the hell just happened to me? And as soon as I said that, I felt the presence of this being. And I sensed the being was somebody that I knew well, perhaps a guide or whatever you want to call it, but somebody who knew me very well and was there for me to receive me. And the communication that I got, which was telepathic, and it was very calm. He was reassuring me, everything is okay. Just be calm. You're going to be fine. And so I communicated back in the same way. And what struck me was the purity of that communication. Was that the thought that you had was delivered exactly as you had generated, and vice versa, if that makes sense. Which, by contrast, when we communicate verbally like we do now and non-verbally, there's a lot of room for misinterpretation, and so it's not that way. And so I remember sort of turning to follow him, and as I did that, I immediately began to see a life review from three perspectives. The first was the way I had experienced my life through my own eyes. The second was the way that the people with whom I interacted experienced me. And the third was sort of this omniscient point of view.
I was outside the hospital, and it's really different. I can't say it's strange, but it's different being in your spiritual body. Because if you're in your physical body and you want to go sit down, you think to yourself, I'm going to go sit down, or that thought enters your mind. And you have to walk over and sit down. Well, in the spiritual body, the thought enters your mind. You just automatically go and sit down. Your body just moves. You don't have to walk anywhere. And I went and sat down with the birds, and a bird landed, like right here next to me, and walked right through both of my legs. And it was at that point that I noticed something was coming, and then something else was coming, and something else was coming. And when these three, I call them angels because I don't know what else to call them. When these three angels got there, they put their heads together and were having a conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but when they were through with their conversation, they started to leave. So the one that went straight away from me, I started to follow. And it must have sensed that I was following it because it stopped. It turned around and it said to me, "You have to go back." And it turned and started going away from me again. And then as it got a little ways away, it turned back around and winked at me like that. And then turned around and left. But I didn't go back. I went down and sat with the birds. And then from there, I went into another sphere. There was blue sky, but that's all there was. There was absolutely nothing out here. And a black man walked out, and you could tell he was a black man, but very beautiful. The angels that came were very beautiful. And this black man walked up to me and said, "You have to go back now." And then I left, and I was back at the birds. And evidently I went back into my body, because when I woke up there I was. But that was the extent of my gallivanting around while they were trying to keep me alive in the hospital.
And I'm being healed because I'm thinking that I'm being ready to walk down a small path to what I see as a golden gate of the entry to heaven, I believe. There was a lot of activity going on behind that gate. I could hear a lot of, I would call them souls, talking, and they were talking about us on earth and how they were preparing different events for different groups. I don't know, I'm still processing that, but it was all about loving us and helping us. So the path that was right in front of me was leading straight to that I say heaven, and I couldn't wait to get there. So I asked the great orb to the glisten of the eye of God, I said, because I thought I was such a not good person and not worth much on earth, and God could not ever come and see me, but I called it the glisten of the eye of God instead. And I asked it to judge me, that I was ready, and I even said, didn't I die with courage? And I would get just healing and instantaneous love beyond any love I ever felt, seen in a movie, told by a story in a storybook as a child or as an adult, these beautiful novels that we have on earth. It was better than any of that. It's indescribable. And I was told to look to my right and left, and I did, and I saw several souls who were just illuminated and sparkling their auras on the terrain, which was all diamond-like and crystal, beautiful white, shimmering rainbow colors as well because of the light from the orb on the ground. At one point, I looked down and I could see that I was shimmering, and it was the first time I realized that I was worth something to this great source who had come to meet me. Even if it was just the glisten of the eye of God, I was so in gratitude, and I wanted to stay. The love was overwhelming, but I wasn't moving. I had 4 relatives to my right and to my left, maternal grandmother, paternal family, grandmother and family here. And I asked the orb again, maybe you didn't hear me. And I thought, it didn't like the word, I was a bad person, you can judge me now. So I better change my wording and say, I was not a good person, so you can judge me now. And all it did was give me more love. And then a second light came out of that bright, luminous white. And that white luminous dimmed just a little bit, which is what God does for us. God just takes a step back and allows us to be the skyscraper architects and the bridge builders and the rocket ship makers and all these things that we think we are as human beings. And that one was golden, and I thought it was Jesus immediately, and it gave me more love. And then it went back, retreated back. I had a life review, which was extraordinary. It showed me things about myself I'd never thought about myself, which was that I was actually good and loving and worth loving. And I came back. I was surprised. I was no longer depressed for the first time in over 50 years. And this is my story. There is nothing to be afraid of. There's going to be a lot of things to do when we get there to help Earth.